Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, physicality was the name of the game when it came to the Raiders' first padded practice. We'll talk about that, plus a whole lot more coming up on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, August 2nd, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, as always, definitely appreciate you and appreciate my man Ari. Does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, we're sounding good, we're doing what we're supposed to do. So many thanks to Ari. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. Of course, Raider Nation, as always, many thanks to you as well. The YouTube page has grown in a major way in a very short amount of time. As I mentioned, Ari does a great job, but you supporting the show is also awesome. So thank you so much. We appreciate you. If you want to reach out to me by way of Twitter, you can do so as well at your boy Q254. And of course, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Those calls and texts will come up in segment number 3 of the show. Segment number 2, there's a handful of players, a handful of positions that I'm really looking at as far as camp battles go, especially now that the pads are on. So we'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as we always do. And there's actually a handful of nuggets that I want to definitely get to. Before I start any of that, though, I do want to let you know today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnToday to get started. So let's go ahead and jump into the news and notes. The Raiders made a handful of roster moves official like a referee's whistle on Tuesday, including the signing of free agent linebacker Darius Harris. I mentioned him on Tuesday's show. Also, quarterback Chase Garbers has re-signed with the Silver and Black. Harris again comes over after 3 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs. Garbers rejoins the Raiders after originally being an undrafted free agent out of Cal back in 2022, spent 15 games on the practice squad. He was elevated to the active roster on the final 2 games, and then he was released when training camp got started this past training camp. So he's back with the team as well. So now they got 4 quarterbacks currently on the roster: Jimmy Garoppolo, Brian Hoyer. They have Aiden O'Connell, of course, and now Chase Garbers is back. In corresponding moves, the Raiders have released tight end O.J. Howard, a guy that I thought was actually going to be probably one of the first released in that tight end room, and now he is. Tackle Justin Murray, and then they waived linebacker Kenai Mauga, and I'm sure I said his name wrong, but there you go. Also, on Tuesday, the Raiders worked out free agent running backs Rex Burkhead and Damian Williams. So don't know if there's a whole lot there, but they did work those guys out. That could be as simple as, in case of emergency, break glass when it comes to those running backs. Just kind of want to know where they've been. Seems like Rex Burkhead has been around the league forever, right? Like he's never going to retire. So, again, just kind of seeing where they are, kicking the tires on him or on both those guys, Burkhead and Damian Williams. Don't know if anything's going to come from that. Also, if you're on the Josh Jacobs look, I think there's a nice little nugget floating around, or I know it's a nice little nugget. I think it's a good sign for running back Josh Jacobs. Josina Anderson from CBS Sports tweeted out on Tuesday, "My understanding is the Raiders are open to restarting talks with running back Josh Jacobs with the hopes of getting him to rejoin the team, which still remains the goal for the organization." Again, that's from Josina Anderson. Now, Vinny Bonsignore, of course, he sent a response on Twitter, said, "Just a FYI on Josh Jacobs and the Raiders. The Raiders have always been open to talking to Jacobs. Nothing has ever changed with that going back to the July 17th deadline." Again, that's from Vinny Bonsignore. But I feel like with that little nugget from Josina Anderson, it basically lets it be known that the Raiders and Josh Jacobs, maybe his representation, are willing to get back to the table and start having a conversation. And, of course, they can't have a multi-year conversation. They can't put together a big multi-year contract. But what they can do is similar to what the Giants did with Saquon Barkley, which is exactly what I think is going to happen sooner rather than later. I would love to see Josh Jacobs back before the 49ers come to town for a joint training camp. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it's a good sign that, it's only August 2nd and Josh Jacobs sounds like his representation is about to get back to the table and talk with Dave Ziegler and company. So hopefully something gets done sooner rather than later. Zamir White, I think he's a really good running back. I think that him and Josh Jacobs would be a nice 1-2 punch for the 2023 season, but we'll see. In the meantime, in between times, Zamir White's getting burned. Britton Brown's getting burned. Austin Walter's getting burned. Sincere McCormick's getting burned. I mean, they got some running backs that are out there doing their thing, but none of those guys are Josh Jacobs. Now, Tuesday was the first padded practice, so I want to really kind of give you my takeaways from it. Of course, I talked about it quite a bit on Tuesday's show, who I was going to be looking for and what position groups I was going to be looking for. Well, I just want to talk about what stood out to me from Tuesday, the first padded practice for the silver and black, and physicality, and more physicality. That's the first and foremost. And you know when the pads come on, of course, as Jacob Johnson said, that's real football. That's when it gets real. And it did get real on Tuesday. And normally the coaching staff, you hear all the time, stay up, stay up, stay up. You know, they don't want those guys going to the ground, even if they have pads on. They just don't want to get these guys injured. Well, I'll tell you right now, there wasn't a whole lot of stay up, stay up, stay up. There was a lot of guys that were actually being tackled to the ground, and I think it was good. I really do. It looked like it was very competitive. Looked like guys were ready to get after it. Mad Max Crosby is, I think, in midseason form already, trash talking and with his play. He introduced Michael Mayer to the league a couple times, got past the rookie tight end multiple times on his way to the quarterback, and would have had multiple sacks on the day, and he knew about it. He also got drawn off sides one time by Jimmy Garoppolo, who had a much better day on Tuesday than he did on Monday. And he was trash talking, and Jimmy G started trash talking to him when he drew him off sides. Mad Max Crosby had to run a lap, and it's funny, there was a couple reports out there saying that Max and Jimmy got into it, and it almost made it sound like they got into a fight. They did not. It was not a fight at all. They just were talking trash, and Jimmy's been talking trash since he's been there. And you know Max is going to talk trash. As a matter of fact, on Tuesday, the Raiders.com had him mic'd up. So there's going to be a really good practice session and a mic'd up session with Max Crosby coming soon that I'm sure that the Raiders had to do a lot of editing work, because Max was talking a lot of trash on Tuesday as he was mic'd up. He was looking for the cameras. He had the mic on him. So I'm sure there was a lot of good stuff and good nuggets that'll be on that, but I'm sure they have to do a lot of editing as well, clean up the language, the colorful language that Max Crosby was given out there on Tuesday. But some more notes from the first padded practice. Unfortunately, Brandon Faison, cornerback, went down. He was carted off with what appeared to be a lower leg injury. I didn't get any kind of report on what happened officially to him, but when he was being carted off, he kind of had his hands on his jersey and inside his shoulder pads, and was really not moving very much. And when he got off the cart, he was helped off into the Raiders' weight room and then walked into the facility. So we didn't see anything from there, but it didn't look great. But I don't want to speculate on the severity of the injury. We'll wait to see what happens and what the final report is on Brandon Faison. But he was a guy that I was expecting to at least maybe not necessarily be a starter, but be a guy that provided depth at that cornerback position. So hopefully he's just it's just a tweak or something, and he might be out for a little while, but nothing long term. But we'll see once a report comes out about Brandon Faison, who again was carted off with what appeared to be a lower leg injury. Marcus Peters, the guy that I have penciled in at one cornerback position, did not have a very good day. Now, one, he was beat by Devontae Adams a couple times. And I'll say this, there's nothing wrong with being beat by Devontae Adams. He's the guy who's going to beat everybody, right? But there was a couple times in one-on-one drills, and I'm a firm believer that one-on-one drills are really meant for the offense to thrive. But, you know, it's good to see Devontae and Marcus Peters going up against each other because, well, Marcus Peters is the guy. They just brought him in as a free agent. He's the most experienced cornerback. He's the one with the most production as far as interceptions go. So one time Jimmy G hit Marcus Peters, or hit Devontae Adams down the sideline, and he beat Marcus Peters, and it was just flat out ran past him. Right. And I don't know how good a shape Marcus is in right now. I don't know if he's still trying to work himself into shape, but Devontae was in like midseason form. And he went right past him, caught the ball on the sideline, tiptoed into the end zone, easy touchdown. Next rep, it was one of those where Marcus is doing what Marcus does. He's going to guess. He's going to gamble. He's going to take a shot because he wants to make a play. So Devontae gave him a couple little shakes and a couple little shimmies here and there, and Devontae broke out, and Marcus guessed in. And so as soon as Marcus guessed in and realized that Devontae was going out, he just stopped because it was over. There was nothing he could do about that. So there was a fan, because there were some fans in attendance of practice on Tuesday. The fan yelled, "Come on, Marcus, get on him." And in some colorful language, he basically told him to be quiet. Not in those words, more in Marcus Peters type words. He basically let him know to be quiet. He didn't say it real loud, but as I'm standing on the sideline with multiple reporters that are standing there, we all were able to hear it because it happened right in front of us. But I don't even know if the fan was able to hear him. But yeah, he was not in that great of a mood after that. But again, it was one-on-one drills. Marcus has only been in camp for a few days. Don't know what kind of shape he's in. Not trying to make excuses for him, but he did not have a great day. There was also another play, and Divine Diablo was lined up, and I want to say he was lined up on a running back. and it might have been Amir Abdullah, or he might have been lined up on DJ Turner. I don't know who he was lined up on, but it was. I think it was a running back, because he went outside and kind of everyone looked like Divine Diablo. Oh wait, hold on, it's a running back. So yeah, it was a running back he was lined up against. When the ball was snapped, he ran with him, bumped him at the line of scrimmage, and then what appeared to me is he passed him off to Marcus Peters, and either Marcus didn't pick up the communication, didn't understand it, or something happened, because the running back got behind Diablo, and it looked like as the ball was floating there, I thought, and it's just me standing there, I thought Marcus was going to get the interception. I thought it was going to be an easy pick for Marcus, and somehow it just kind of fell into the running back's hands, and I kind of looked around, I was like, wait, isn't that the play he's supposed to make? And everyone said, oh, well, that wasn't Marcus's guy, and a couple other people were like, I think it was. I think that Diablo passed him along after bumping him at the line of scrimmage and running with him for a couple yards. He passed him off, and Marcus was supposed to pick him up. So maybe that was just a communication thing, but it wasn't a great day as far as I was concerned for Marcus Peters. Nate Hobbs, he returned to practice in full capacity. He shed the red non-contact jersey, so he had the black jersey on, so he was out there, and he got cooked a couple times by Hunter Renfro, got cooked one time by Devontae Adams, but he was out there competing, right? And that was a good thing. And again, he had no red non-contact jersey on, so it feels like he was back out there ready to rock and roll. There was a session when Peters was on one outside, the rookie Jacorian Bennett was on the other outside, and then Nate Hobbs was in the slot. So that kind of gave you an idea of what they were looking at least in that rep. And maybe that's something they're looking at. Maybe those are the guys that are the leaders in the clubhouse for the starting corner position. Again, only 6 practices in the books, so there's a lot that can happen between now and the start of the season. And really, the date you're looking at is August 29th. That's the next date you're looking at. That's when the roster has to be trimmed down to 53-man roster. So it's at 90 officially, but 91 technically, and it's got to be down to 53 by August 29th. So that's really the date to kind of look back at. Jimmy G, as I mentioned, had a really much better day than he did on Monday. Hit a couple deep balls, also made some nice underneath throws, and the short and intermediate stuff. That's where Jimmy G is going to thrive. But he really looked like he had a good day. As I mentioned, he drew Max Crosby off sides and was talking trash to him. He was talking trash to Marcus Peters early before the practice got started. So as I mentioned before, that Jimmy's just clearly one of the guys, and that they could appreciate that from him. That's just exactly who he looks to be. Just looks like he's one of those guys. He's going to talk trash. I didn't expect Jimmy G to be the guy out there talking trash, but he definitely was. So, Max, when he jumped off sides, he had to run a lap. And, of course, Max is okay with that. He's full throttle all the time. He had fun with the fans, telling them to turn up and get excited. And he was laughing and, all that good stuff. Now, one guy who had to run laps, and he's had to run laps multiple times, is offensive lineman Jermaine Illuminor. And this is starting to become a problem as far as I'm concerned. Multiple false starts. He's had multiple false starts in 6 practices. He's had to run laps probably 3 or 4 times already. So at some point, he's got to cut that out. And if you remember, he had that issue and had that problem back in the regular season. So he's got to find a way to get away from, all these false start penalties, or, maybe someone's going to end up putting him on the bench or even taking his job if he can't stay away from those penalties. And so that's really kind of the roundup from the day one of padded practices. It was very spirited. Guys were clearly happy to be out there, and physicality was the name of the game. Finally, Josh McDaniels, he'll speak to the media at 7:45 this morning at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. And then, of course, practices from 8:30 to 10:30, and we'll have player availability following that. Again, that's 8:30 to 10:30 Pacific time, 7:45 a.m. Pacific time. Josh McDaniels will talk. The players are off on Thursday. So that's all I got for you. Just a recap of day one of padded practice, and, of course, also some news and notes as far as roster moves go. Coming up in segment number 2, camp battles. Some players and some positions that I'm really paying attention to, that I'm really intrigued by. We'll talk about that after I tell you about the title sponsor of today's show, which is FanDuel. And right now, you need to take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. It's all on the app that's safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. No better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Something I talked about on the radio on Tuesday, training camp battles. Now that the pads have come on, of course, they're not going to be on every single day, but now that they're on, I really want to focus in on some camp battles. And I have a couple on my mind that stand out in particular that I'm very, very adamant about, that I'm trying to pay as close attention to as possible. And the first one is Trey Tucker versus DeAndre Carter. DeAndre Carter was brought in as a free agent. He's really good at the kick return game as far as kick and punt return, and he broke out as a wide receiver last year for the Chargers. And then the Raiders went and drafted Trey Tucker in the 3rd round out of Cincinnati, and a lot of people thought, what in the world are you drafting him for? He's not even the best wide receiver on his team. He's not this, he's not that. But he's got speed. We know that he's got wheels, and he was a really good kick returner when he was at Cincinnati. Now, he's learning the punt return game. And I'll tell you this, from what I've seen from Trey Tucker, again, only a handful of practices, so I don't want to over exaggerate or get over the moon and get too high on just a small sample size. What I've seen from Trey Tucker, man, he is out there competing in a major way as a receiver, as a kick returner, as a punt returner. So he's a young dude. He was drafted. You know he's going to make the team. It's not about making the team with this camp battle. It's about when is Trey Tucker going to get on the field, and is he going to make a dude like DeAndre Carter expendable? And the reason I say that, the only reason I question it, is because there's 11 wide receivers in the room right now. That wide receiver room has 11. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfro. I feel real comfortable. All 3 of those guys are going to make it. So there's a battle for 8. Trey Tucker is going to make it as a guy who was drafted in the 3rd round. They're not going to cut him. So really, it's a battle for 7. And everyone's not going to make it. Josh McDaniels mentioned that on Saturday when he met with us. There's 11 wide receivers, 11 corners. There's not going to be 11 wide receivers and 11 corners when it's all said and done. So I want to see how quickly Trey Tucker can earn a spot and earn playing time. And if the Raiders come out of training camp and preseason and feel like Trey Tucker is ready, I can see DeAndre Carter by August 29th being a guy that's released and let go. Not that he doesn't have talent. Not that he can't provide something, because I think he can. You know, he's a burner. Trey's a burner. He caught some good passes in L.A. with the Chargers last year, and kick return and punt return he can do. And we all know the Raiders need as much kick return and punt return ability as possible. Again, Tucker did that really well as far as kick returning when he was at Cincinnati, not punt returning, but he's learning it. And I think he's done a really good job so far, and he's got burst. He's got wiggle, and he's a guy that a lot of people believe in. We talked to special teams coordinator Coach McMahon on Tuesday following practice and asked him about Trey Tucker. This is what he had to say about the rookie, the 3rd round pick out of Cincinnati.
Yeah, you know, Trey's done a great job. People have to realize that Trey was a kick returner at Cincinnati, you know, so Trey naturally can catch kickoffs, you know, and what he's done for us, he's done a great job of, and he's got a ways to go. We all have a ways to go, but he's really trying to learn how to catch punts, you know, and an NFL punt is 1,000% different than a college punt. Okay, there's not a lot of guys in college that can hit 5-0, 4-5s, and it's a rollout play. As all of you know in this room, the college punt is Mars and we're on Earth. Okay, they can roll out and everybody can release when the ball snapped, and so you get the rugby punts. You don't get any of those. You have to pocket punt pretty much in this league, so he has to get under balls and catch them. And what I like is he is taking Danny Amendola's coaching. Okay, he's taking DC, Hunter, all those guys, and he's trying to emulate them because they do it right. You know, he's got the best coach in the league that's done this for many years.
So, again, that's the first camp battle I'm really paying attention to. I've told anyone who will listen that's standing on that sideline with us that, hey, Trey Tucker, DeAndre Carter is what I'm really paying attention to in that wide receiver room. And look, that's not the only moves that are going to be made in the wide receiver room because, again, they have 11. They're not going to carry 11 into the regular season. They're not going to carry 9. They're not going to carry 10. They're not going to carry 8, right? Most likely they're going to carry, 6? Maybe 7? But I feel like 6 is going to be a comfortable number when it comes to the wide receivers. So there's going to be some tough decisions made there. So I'm looking at that Trey Tucker, DeAndre Carter, battle number 1. Battle number 2, Trayvon Merrick and Chris Smith. I mentioned Trayvon Merrick on Tuesday when I knew that the pads were going on, and I hate to say this about the guy because I like him a lot coming out of TCU. I covered the Big 12 a lot, so I got to see him up close and personal. And, man, 25 is out there, but that is it. Right. And I know that saying is probably wearing on people like, all right, Q, I get it. He hasn't done anything, but he hasn't. And that bothers me. He hasn't done anything, made any kind of play that makes you say, okay, I see it. He's figuring it out. He can be that guy. I believe, and it's funny, I was standing next to Cassie Soto from the RJ. She's been on the podcast and been on my radio show many times on Tuesday. And during the little filming segment, you know, they give us like 8 to 10 minutes, possibly max, to video and during the stretching. It's nothing that, no kind of real drills that you're really able to film. I mean, they have a couple little drills that you can film, but nothing like 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 or when they're running any kind of plays. We can't film any of that. But she said, she looked at me and she goes, Trayvon Merrick, there's 25. That's your boy. How big of a training camp is that for him? And I was like, man, I mean, he's got to earn his spot. Chris Smith, the rookie out of Georgia, not only has he been, making some plays and you're seeing his number being called and you're seeing him, line people up correctly where they're supposed to be, but he's also a guy that had ball skills and ball production coming out of college, right? I mean, 6 interceptions the last 2 years at Georgia on his way to being a back-to-back national champion. So he kind of knows what it's been, what it looks like. And that's the one thing, and I mentioned it on Tuesday's show, that a lot of the guys that the Raiders brought in this past offseason by way of free agency and the draft all have production in college, especially the draft. The defensive guys that they drafted, even the offensive guys that they drafted, all have production in college. And Trayvon Merrick just hasn't made enough plays in the NFL. He literally has 1 interception, and that's it. And it seems like he's been late. When I see him rotating over and trying to help out on like a deep ball, I see him behind the play where he's there to help make the tackle, but he's not there to help break up the ball. And so this training camp, I think, is huge for him. So Trayvon Merrick and Chris Smith, that is a battle that I'm paying attention to. And then the quarterback battle across from Marcus Peters. Who's going to be that starting outside guy? Is it going to be, as I mentioned earlier, Peters and Bennett? Is it going to be Peters and Hobbs? Is a guy like Sam Webb, who was an undrafted free agent a year ago, is he going to get that spot? Is David Long going to get that spot? Duke Shelley, Brandon Faison, if healthy. Amik Robertson, where does Amik last? Where does he lie? Is he a guy that's going to be on the roster? I feel like every year I've written him off, and he just sticks around. He's one of the few guys that made plays on the Raiders defense last year. Hobbs and Hall, are they competing for the slot position? I mean, again, one of the reps that I saw on Tuesday was Peters, Bennett, and Hobbs. Hobbs was in the slot. That could very easily be, the starting 3 corners that are out on the field. Obviously Hobbs being in the slot and Marcus Peters and Jacorian Bennett being on the outside. Bennett is competing. Bennett's competing in a major way to prove that he deserves to be out there. As is Trey Tucker. Neither one of those guys is going to get cut. They're going to be on the roster, but both guys are fighting to prove that they belong on the field sooner rather than later. So I can easily see Bennett being the guy across from Peters. And I'll say this, right? I know Peters is going to round into shape, I believe, but I think he's got a little something to prove. Like I'm penciling him in, like he's got that spot, no doubt. But he can't just breeze through training camp and preseason and not really try and just think, oh, I'll show up week 1 versus Denver and I'll be all pro. Like, I think he's got a lot of work to prove as well. I mean, he's not on the right side of 30, right? He's obviously coming off a down season, which was coming off an injury season. So I think that Peters has a lot to prove. I believe he's a starter right now, but I don't think he can just cruise through training camp and preseason and think that, oh, don't worry, come Denver and then Buffalo and then back home for Pittsburgh and then LA against the Chargers, everything will be fine. I'll be good to go. I'll make plays on the ball. Like I want to see a few Marcus Peters plays throughout the course of training camp preseason just to know that, okay, yeah, he does have a little something still left. But those are really the battles that I'm looking for in camp. So what says you? 707-654-4693. What camp battles stand out to you? Trey Tucker versus DeAndre Carter, that's first one for me. Trayvon Merrick versus Chris Smith is number 2. And the quarterback battle across from Marcus Peters. Who is going to line up on the outside across from him? Who's going to end up in the slot? Is it going to be Hobbs? Is it going to be Hall? Who's going to be on the outside? Let us know about it, or let me know about it. 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts are coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts are off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Jason and MV. He's calling to talk about Hunter Renfro and the conversation we had about him on Monday's show. Wants to point out a couple things about the slot machine. Here he is, Jason and MV.
Q. Jason NV here. I just listened to the podcast about Hunter Renfro. And one thing that you forgot to mention, too, because he's hungry to have a comeback here, he made a right decision driving to South Carolina to clear his head. We've heard a lot of great stories about players clearing their heads. The competition in each position is helping them clear their heads because they know now. They got to perform. It's not a free ride. We don't conduct ourselves sloppy anymore. We don't make silly decisions anymore. We breed competition. We breed a Super Bowl winning talent. And I don't care what anybody says. When you get a chip, I don't care if it's 1 or 10 like Brady. But the bottom line is people want what the other man has. And that means they're willing to go through any length to get it. I'm rooting for Hunter Renfro. That's my boy right there. I think he can be just as hot as Julian Edelman was. You know? I'm telling you, Q, you do a great job. I can't wait to come see you at the Oreo. I can't wait to come see you at your other events this year. I'm from Vegas. I'm excited about this. I want the fan base to realize whether we have a 2-15 season or a 15-2 season, at least we're moving in the right direction. We're making smart business transactions, and we're doing the right thing. You, Clay Baker, Vinny Bonsignor, Lindsey Brown, you guys are covering the team like a glove, and I try to listen quick, fast, in a hurry every morning. It's 4:38. I'm heading to the warehouse, baby. Put in some work. Have a great day. And by the way, Raiders.
Jason, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, Renfro was able to clear his head on his drive to South Carolina. I think that was a big deal. Get back to basics and understand what he can do. And I'll say this, Renfro, I mentioned earlier in segment number 1 that Jimmy G looked good on Tuesday. Renfro has been looking really good so far in camp, period. He really has. I mean, Renfro is looking like, and I've mentioned it, I think I talked to Jason Horowitz about it. I talked to Vinny. I know I talked to Paul Gutierrez about it on the sidelines there at practice. He looks like a guy that can thrive in this offense and really do a lot of the underneath stuff, the drive extenders, 5 yards here, 6 yards there, first down here, first down there. Then all of a sudden, after he slot machines you to death, all of a sudden one pops for like 20, 25 yards or maybe more. Right? You just kind of get peppered and peppered and peppered, and all of a sudden he slips one. You think he's going down, he slips one, and boom, he gets a big gain. So I really like how they're using Hunter right now. I see a ton of underneath stuff, and I think that those are going to be drive extenders. Those are going to be great for Jimmy. Get the ball out of his hands quick, fast, and in a hurry, and then boom, you get 5 yards, you get 6 yards, you get a first down. Keep the defense off the field and extend the drives. Have longer drives, but you gotta convert those long drives into what? Touchdowns, not field goals. But I really do think that Hunter has a big role he could play in this offense moving forward. So thanks so much, Jason, for that call. I appreciate you. Thanks for the kind words. Up next, got a text from Jersey Raider. He actually sent an image that said the Raiders basically traded Rocky Yassin for Marcus Peters and saved $1.5 million and said he found it interesting. Thanks, Jersey Raider, for that text. And, yeah, I mean, and I was never a big Rocky Yassin fan after I saw what he was able to do with the Raiders. I mean, I liked him a lot coming out of Temple, but he just never really materialized into the guy that he was expected to be. And even with the Raiders last season, I kind of looked at him and was like, he was okay, right? I never thought he was anything to, write home about. And, man, you have to go ahead and hold on to him. So he goes to Baltimore. The Raiders end up getting Marcus Peters. At least Marcus has ball production, right? 32 career interceptions. That's something that I get excited about because I know the Raiders need to create as many turnovers as possible. Hopefully they're able to get the return on investment. Hopefully Marcus is able to be Marcus Peters. He ain't going to be the guy that gets 8 to 10 interceptions in a season, but get yourself 4 or 5 interceptions or 3 or 4, do something like that. That's a positive. That's a good step. The Raiders nobody had more than 2 interceptions last year. Perriman, Harmon, and Amik Robertson all had 2. And now 4 of those interceptions are gone because Harmon's not on the team and neither is Perriman. Only Amik Robertson, and he's going to be fighting for his job. So thank you for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Brother Dre in the A. He's calling to talk about the national media and what they're saying and expecting the Raiders to do. And also he gives his thoughts on the first padded practice. Here he is, Brother Dre, in the A. It's too many rhymes there. Brother Dre in the A.
What up, Q? It's your boy, Brother Dre in the A. In Atlanta here, Andre in Atlanta. Wanted to just actually weigh in on a couple things that I've heard here recently. Number one, when it comes to the national media and what they have as far as their opinion of the Raiders is concerned, Q, let's face it, man. We don't deserve to get any benefit of the doubt. Our team has underperformed, and we've basically a team of unmet expectations, right? So anything that we don't get, we shouldn't be mad at national media for saying that we're not very good because I think like Bill Parcells says, we are what our record says we are. So, right now we're not very good. I'm optimistic about what the future holds. The only way to get the stink of underperformance off is by winning. So I look forward to the opportunity. I really do hope that the team looks at this as a us against the world, as one of those rallying cry where they say, hey, you know what? They doubted us, but look at us now, right? So hopefully this will turn into something like that for the Raiders, and we'll be able to benefit from that. Even though it's negative now, hopefully by the time the year ends, it'll be positive. Also, when it comes to pads, man, I'm looking forward to hearing what it goes on in the padded practices. You really can't tell what goes on without the padded practices. That's pretty much like aerobics class. You can tell, you'll work up a sweat, and you can kind of tell like agility and stuff like that, but you really don't know what somebody can do as far as hitting somebody is concerned, as far as being able to shed blocks is concerned. You really can't tell. So looking forward to hearing the results of the first padded practice, and I'm really hopeful that this team will really outperform and outdo what the national media is saying that they're going to do. Thanks a lot, man. Later.
Dre, thanks for the call. And yeah, I agree 100%, man. The best way, and I mentioned it on Tuesday's show, to get the national media and the narrative about the Raiders to change is for the Raiders to win. That's the best deodorant ever. Winning, winning, winning. And the Raiders have not done that enough consistently. Bottom line, anyone who's a fan who knows that. Right. And look, and I got excited and high on the Raiders last year, thinking that they were going to make some massive run because they had an offense that can compete with anybody, and the defense just had to make a few plays, and it just didn't turn out that way. So maybe this year, with the expectations not being that high or not even understood, like I said, I'm not even sure what to expect from this team yet. I think I'm getting a better idea the more training camp I get to see, and I feel like by the end of training camp and preseason, I'll have a really good idea of what I think this team could be. But right now, I'm not going to lie to you. If I told you what I think the expectations are going to be, I'd be blowing smoke up your backside, and I'm not going to do that to you. I got more respect for you and Raider Nation than to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's simple. You go out and win games, and your expectations and the national media starts talking about you. Until then, the expectations are going to be the same old, same old. They're going to be a bad team, and they're going to pick early in the draft. It's just that simple. They got to go out and prove that the narrative is wrong. Thank you for that call. I appreciate you. Up next, got a quick text from Raider Castro in East Bakerfield. Hey, Q, with Faison going down, do you think we'll try and sign T. Hill, Deron Harmon, or Casey Hayward? And did Diablo get injured? That's Raider Castro in East Bakersfield. And thanks for the text. I don't know the severity of Faison yet, so that's to be determined. But they have 11 corners in the room. So I think that they feel pretty comfortable with who's there and the competition and the depth that they have, and that's why they built it up. But he was a guy that was expected to be, at the very least, some good quality depth, a nice rotation piece, physical at the line of scrimmage, and that's what they want. So hopefully it's not a big injury, but you just never know exactly what it could be. As far as signing someone else, I'm not too sure. Casey Hayward, I think he's, seen his better days. Deron Harmon, he's that safety role. I don't think that they're ready to sign him yet because they're still interested to see what they got in the back end. And Diablo, he missed Tuesday's practice. He was supposed to talk to the media after Tuesday's practice. He didn't. He wasn't there, but I did see him out there on Wednesday. He had a few plays that he made, so I think he's okay. So I'll update you on that. We'll kind of get an update. I'll ask Coach McDaniels this morning about Faison if someone else doesn't ask him about Faison. And who else? And Tyree Wilson. Want to ask him about the young man out of Texas Tech to see if he's getting closer to returning as well. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you, and got time for one more call. We'll take it from Raider Cal out of Canada. He's calling to talk about head coach Josh McDaniels mic'd up and has a question about Hunter Renfro. Here he is, Raider Cal from Canada.
Hey, Q. It's Raider Cal from Canada calling. I just saw they had a mic'd up session with Josh McDaniels. I was wondering if you could see it. I tried sending it to you. But anyways, I saw that he was talking to Hunter Renfro, and he said, do what you've got to do. Just wondering from what you've seen, do you think he's going to let up on Renfro, kind of let him do what he does? I'm just thinking after looking at his stats from last year with Renfro, maybe him freelancing a little bit is a bit of a defensive mechanism. Maybe he wants to be a little further away from the defensive back because he doesn't want to get hit as hard. But, yeah, I'm just hoping to see the guy succeed. It's the wife's favorite player. Got her the jersey and everything, so helped me get my wife into the Raiders. So I'm just hoping to see him succeed. Anyways, yeah, thanks, Q. Bye-bye.
Cal, thanks for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And, again, as I mentioned, man, Renfro looks the part so far. He looks really good. I called him unguardable earlier. I mean, it's just kind of who he looks like. He can really be an asset in this offense. He just has to continue to go. And, if Josh McDaniels told him to, do whatever it takes to get open or do whatever you got to do, that's a good thing. That's head coach Josh McDaniels understanding his personnel better than he did last year. And that's part of the maturation process, right? You don't know who your guys are immediately when you walk into the building. That's with any job, right? I mean, you don't know. You think you know what these guys are capable of, but until you actually work with people, you don't know who they are. And again, like I said, I think that's any walk of life. I think that anybody, like I could walk into a building and I could think that I know you and 10 other people from what I've seen from the distance, but until I actually work with you day in and day out and hands in and hands out, all that good stuff, really don't know. And so it takes a little bit of time. So hopefully Josh McDaniels knows what his players can do and what they do best and how they operate best. And I think that's something that Gruden had to learn with Hunter Renfro, is how he got open, and then you saw him really thrive. So hopefully Josh McDaniels took a step or a page out of Gruden's book and is allowing Hunter Renfro to be Hunter Renfro, because if he can, he's going to be a dominant player in this offense as far as I'm concerned. So thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. That's all the time we got for on today's show. Coming up tomorrow, we'll get a text from Raider07, Matt in Little Rock. Nathan Glass gave us a good call. We'll get that, plus some more. We'll have more news and notes of the day. Of course, we talked to head coach Josh McDaniels today. And, of course, we'll have some more conversation talking about training camp. They'll be off on Thursday, so it should be a fun show coming up tomorrow. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.